Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whichever the case may be. Welcome to the February 2026 issue of the MSMF Solutions for a Happy Life podcast. Gentlemen, how are you?
Doing well. Great.
Yeah. How's 2026 started for you?
Fast.
Cold.
Fast and cold. Yeah, it's fast. We're midway through February. How in the living hole did that happen? I mean, crazy. You were up at 4:30 this morning with the kids. You going to make it through this podcast?
I was. I have 3 cups of coffee, so I'm good.
Okay. All right. And how's your little tribe?
They're good. They're not up at 4:30.
Hopefully you're not either. I mean, between the two of you, you're about halfway to a girls' softball team. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah, got the infield filled out.
Yeah, yes, you do. All right, Cody, Kraig, here's what we're going to do. We're going to actually introduce a new segment for 2026, and we're going to call it In the News, Make It Make Sense. Right?
Maybe.
Well, okay. Let me clarify that. In the financial news, because there's a lot of stuff in the news that we probably can't make it make sense. We'd probably be here for 3 or 4 days. So, but in the financial news, make it make sense. And what we're trying to do, we all see a lot of financial writers in the consumer financial press, a lot of whom do a very good job of explaining to clients kind of how it applies to their situation, what to do with the information. But there are a lot of folks out there that write like they're trying to convince us how smart they are. Like they probably should be writing for an industry magazine that we would read as opposed to a consumer financial magazine.
Right.
So the whole idea of this segment, and we'll do this periodically throughout the year, and a little piece of it here, or maybe a whole podcast there like we're doing today, is to take what's out there in the consumer financial publication world and really explain it, how our clients can use the information, knowing it's in its original form, it was a little light. And so we're going to deepen it. Okay? So let's start with, Kraig, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to call this the rising tide of consumer delinquencies. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to let you go through all that. And this goes back to a Bloomberg article that was here in early February 2026. So talk to us about the rising tide of consumer delinquencies.
Yeah, so according to the Fed Reserve Bank of New York, household debt delinquency rates have climbed to 4.8%, which is the highest level since 2017. And so we've been talking about this a lot in our client meetings about this kind of K-shaped economy we're in right now, where those with financial assets, large incomes, they've continued to spend like they have been. However, those that have lower incomes have seen, with how much inflation we've seen over the last few years, that's really eaten into what they can spend on an everyday basis. And so because of that, a lot of people have turned to credit cards. Auto loan debt is going up as well. And so if your everyday spending is going towards more at the grocery store, things like that, if you have other debts, that makes it hard to pay off those debts. And so it kind of snowballs and creates this kind of debt cycle that we're starting to see. So mortgage rates are still historically low. So as far as mortgages go, that's still looking pretty good. We're not in like a 2008 type of situation. But things like credit cards, auto loans, student loans is a big one because of the moratorium they put on after COVID. That is starting to kick in. So that's had the biggest jump up. I think the JP Morgan site's at about 14.8% now, just because people didn't have to pay them and it was kind of a one fell swoop thing. But because of that, not only did inflation hurt, but interest rates have obviously gone up quite dramatically than where they have been the last 15 years as well. So when interest rates went up, if you have a credit card, you may have noticed that your interest rate, instead of being 15, 16%, it's now at 20+%, maybe as high as, somewhere darn near 30% on some of the credit cards. So that obviously means, as the snowball continues, more and more that you have to pay off. So we are starting to see that, ways to kind of address that, looking at the credit card balances you have. If you have one that has a small balance that you can really attack and get paid off, pay that one off first, and then you can start attacking the larger balances. Or look at which one has the highest interest rate. Obviously, anything you pay towards a credit card, if it has a 20% interest rate, anything you put towards that, think about having a 20% gain in your portfolio, which is far higher than the average, the S&P 500. So different ways you can do that, but just making sure you have a plan is going to be the biggest thing, and staying on top of it so you can start to pay those down.
So let me just make a quick comment, which I'm still amazed by. And I don't believe we've had any legislation pass to cap consumer credit card interest rates. But when that thing can be 25%, that's insane. And if you don't tackle it, pay it down, or at least pay the interest, it's going to just snowball out of control.
Yeah, compounding is great when it's working for you, but not when it's working against you. And that's the other thing, when you look at your credit card statement, it's going to have the minimum payment on there. Just because you make the minimum payment doesn't mean that you're not going to continue to pay interest on it. You're not actually paying down your principal. You're just making the minimum that they're making you to keep the card in place. So just remember that just because you make the minimum payment, there's still going to be continuing interest going on top of that, on top of the minimum.
Yeah, and we still see people climbing out of some holes from COVID, from 22% CPI in the last administration. And inflation has slowed, but it's still a positive number. So more and more clients have additional debt on their balance sheet, and reach out, because we can walk you through a management strategy of that, of how to systematically click it off.
You got it.
Super. All right, Cody. We're going to introduce a new term for you.
I can't wait.
Okay. The make it make sense is treat-onomics and the shift in consumer spending. So let me set it up for you. So there is a very large advertising and communication firm out there called WPP, which I believe is the worldwide global leader. And one of their firms they own is a company called VML. And we may have clients who are familiar with all these names. Most of our clients are probably not in the branding, marketing, communication space, content creation. But VML produces something called the Future 100 Report. And just here recently in February, they came out with this year's version of the Future 100. And they introduced this term called treat-onomics, give the dog a bone, treat. So if you could walk us through, first of all, what that means, because it's a term that we'd be like, okay, what in the Sam heck are you talking about? And how it finds its way back into consumer financial strategy.
Yeah, so I think it's a takeaway from kind of replacing maybe vacation homes or large asset accumulations that generations before were kind of accustomed to doing, and exchanging those for smaller, more frequent experiences. So, mini vacations, shared type resources to where they can do more often type things in return than investing in, maybe a future vacation home down the road. Right. So I think the big thing with it is just because it's kind of like, use the analogy of of snacking, right? So you get a big bag of potato chips, you know exactly how much you're eating, but if you're taking a couple handfuls at a time here and there, maybe it adds up a little bit more than you think.
Right.
So I think the big thing is if you're doing that, which is perfectly fine, just make sure you're not getting into the trap that you think that these small expenses over time don't add up, and that you're spending one, more than you think, two, more than you can handle, and that you're not saving up for retirement down the road. You're right. Instead of going on your mini trip, you're not putting the 5% in your 401k and not getting the match on top of it.
Right.
Because that's going to have a pretty big impact down the road.
Pretty negative impact.
Correct.
Yeah, and I think to be fair, just to ask you this question, well, maybe it's a statement, you can comment on it. We see this with our late 20, early 30, late 30-year-old clients.
Right.
They're much more into the experience than maybe their parents or grandparents were in terms of vacation. Very unique, kind of off the beaten path type of trips and experiences. And I think the problem we've seen, and please weigh in on this, is that instead of one or two a year, they start treating them like, hey, let's do these all the time, but the cost is significant, and it's much greater than a large 2 or 3 week vacation once a year, or even the investment to buy a vacation property or a timeshare or even something like that. And then it negatively impacts cash flow. And now we're into what you just talked about. We're not saving for everything else.
Yeah, I mean, it affects it all.
Right.
And you're thinking the smaller trips don't cost as much as the upfront $5,000 vacation or whatnot you're going to spend it on. But when you do heck, even one times a month, and it costs you, $800.
Right.
Well, that costs more than the $5,000.
Right. So it's certainly something to keep an eye on. It's almost like vacation creep. We've redefined what these micro vacations mean, but now we're taking more of them and we're creeping into cash flow.
Right.
And sadly, the first thing that people do is they start saving less. Well, now we've got a trickle down effect that's going to follow them around the rest of their life.
Yes.
Okay. Treatonomics, Kraig.
Yeah,
Why don't you give the dog a bone?
I had not heard of that one. Yeah.
Treatonomics, right? Make it make sense. That's why we're talking about it.
Thanks, Cody.
Okay, the last one. Now, we talked a little bit about this, guys, in January, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or the One Big Beautiful Act that was passed on July 4th, 2025. We talked about what some of the provisions were, Kraig, but we really didn't get into what the expectation is for the ultimate tax benefits. Sure. And I know the Journal, Wall Street Journal this year, and Barron's late last year, they started putting some numbers to the stuff. Mm-hmm. So if you could talk a little bit about what the potential impact is to clients. Again, I'll caveat, we don't prepare returns, we don't sign them, but we're all certified financial professionals. We know the flow of a tax return, we know what the net result is. Talk to us about kind of this tailwind of potential surplus cash flow people are going to get with these returns.
Yeah, so obviously not going to get into all the specific ones, but there was obviously a lot of added deductions within the big, beautiful bill. One of the biggest ones was the additional $6,000 deduction for anybody over the age of 65. So depending on your income, if you're over the age of 65, in addition to the regular standard deduction and the senior deduction they already had before that, there is now an additional $6,000 deduction that you can take for your taxes.
Wait, how old for the senior deduction?
65. Not quite. So with that, economists estimate that this spring there'll be an additional $50 to $55 billion in additional tax refunds hitting consumer pockets, or about $1,000 higher than the average return last year. And so with that, that can potentially be a big windfall for your checkbook. And so you just want to go in before you do your taxes. We suggest having some type of game plan, because you may be really surprised, especially if you didn't update your withholdings during last year, about how high of a refund you could get. So you think of it this way, kind of going back to the debt conversation we're having. If you have any type of debts that you want to pay off, maybe say, okay, before I even know what my return number is, I'm going to put, a third of it or half of it towards my debt. The other half either towards savings or towards, you always want to have some fun with any surplus savings. So, don't just say I'm going to put it all towards one thing or the other. Have a little fun with the savings, but just going in there with a plan, so you don't say, hey, I got $5,000 that I wasn't expecting, because what happens when we see that, we typically go spend it. So if you go into before you do your taxes with some type of plan, knowing you're going to save, again, a third, a quarter, something towards either debt or savings, just so you don't spend it all, is something we would suggest, because you might be surprised at how much you actually get back based on some of the numbers we've seen lately.
Yeah, the numbers they're thrown around are pretty big. Mm-hmm. And it's obviously is dependent on everyone's personal situation, but I love the idea to have a plan. So when it comes back, your eyes don't get really big. And now we're Treatonomics, right? We are going to save some, put some towards debt, and then go. You're supposed to enjoy the journey to retirement, spend a little. So, yeah, I love it. Cody, I'm going to give you a bonus question here.
Okay.
So, Kraig says that they're estimating in this journal, in this Barron's article, $50 billion to $55 billion in additional, on top of the prior years of tax refunds. What is that going to do to the economy and potentially the market?
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of studies done. Any time that you have less money going into taxes, it's a good thing for the economy, because we just talked about it. What do? We spend it, right?
Right.
So most of that money would be spent back into the economy, cycled through. So it's certainly a positive from that standpoint. But to Craig's point here, it'd be good if you could save, up to a third of that for future expenses
for the future.
Down the road.
Yeah. So we could expect that's something that could have a positive impact, let's say in the second half of 2026,
Right.
for the economy and the market and our clients' money.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, when they get their refunds, and that'll be April time frame. So you're getting ready. Yeah, you're rounding it into the second half.
Awesome. All right, gentlemen. Make it make sense.
Treatonomics. Let's go.
Treatonomics. You made it make sense. It's Codynomics.
It is.
All right, gents. Well, thank you again. And thank all of you for listening. And if Treatonomics or anything else requires further explanation, please call us, email us, text us, share it with your family and friends. And we look forward to talking to you next month. Good morning, everyone. Hey, I just wanted to follow up on the February podcast on something I had forgot to mention. My colleague Chris Seifert has suggested I talk to you about some issues around tax documents, and I completely spaced and forgot to do it. So I wanted to make sure we attach this quick video to the rest of the podcast. It is tax time, and we often get requests from many of you to forward your consolidated brokerage statements or your 1099s from mutual fund companies or other providers onto your CPA or tax professional. And I just wanted to let you know that we do need written documentation to do that. Calling and leaving a voicemail is not compliant for us in order to forward those documents. So for instance, if you send a note to me, and all of you know with me, if you're going to email me, you better email Kraig at the same time because I lost the email battle, probably a decade ago. But just shoot us an email at our Cetera email address. In my case, it's mark.finke@ceterafs.com. And copy Kraig Rehkemper at CeteraFS, Kraig.Rehkemper@CeteraFS.com, or you can email Cody. Any of our Cetera email addresses, and if email's a challenge, you can always just write us a quick note and mail it. But we cannot accept voicemail to forward tax documents. We're happy to do it, but we need something in writing, and that's just the rules and regs that we got to live by. So hopefully that helps, and we're happy to get any documentation to your CPA or tax professional, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.